Thank you for that, Ben. Diane, let's bring you back in to get deeper into the type of agendas that are being used against us. I'll say we've just stolen a little bit of your time in that segment, but carry on through yours, because this is very important what you've got to cover.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Yeah, it was really interesting just to go back a little bit to the book festival, because this also led me to think about this what I'm going to cover now. There were a couple of sessions that talked about decolonization. One was by Lucy Mangan, who is a Guardian TV critic, and her session was called "How Reading Shapes Our Lives," and she talked about her book called Bookish and about her books of love, her love of books, love of libraries, and how when she first experienced a university library, she was really excited about the fact that it was all there. So I asked what ended up being the last question in the session, and what did she think about decolonization in university libraries? And she didn't know what it was. So I said it's actually the process of changing language in library catalogs to make it less offensive, the removal of items written by straight colonialist white men, for example, to make room for more diverse authors. And she admitted that she was in the minority, agreeing with me, saying that this wasn't a good thing, which may not be good for her relationship with The Guardian. But when she said that, it actually generated a round of applause in the audience, which was really great to hear. And people sitting near me told me at the end that I was on the right side of history after I explained that this was part of my cancellation from academia and librarianship because I opposed it. There was another session by a man called Jack Ashby, who is the assistant director of the Museum of Zoology at Cambridge. According to his Blue Sky profile, his pronouns are he, him, so that's important to note. He said that less than 1% of collections are on display in the world's natural history museums. So it sounded interesting to see, what else we could do to have more specimens and so on to be shown in natural history. But actually, the direction that it took was a little bit different, because he started to talk about how it's a problem that most of the specimens on display at natural history museums were males. And he suggested that maybe having more female specimens on display would help smash the patriarchy, which he actually said on a slide. He talked about social justice issues and how we need to be more diverse and inclusive, and that we need less Darwin or white men and more of the people who did the work who might not be white men. So I asked him a question. I said, well, since you said in your talk that 0.4% of the world's species are mammals, why is it so important to worry about how humans are represented diversely in natural history museums, given that humans would be even less than 0.4% of all the species in the world, and that maybe they should be more concerned, for example, about the diversity of the insect species that were on display? And his response was that when people of different backgrounds come into natural history museums, such as his at Cambridge, they don't feel represented or included. And so I went to that museum's website, and it has, for example, if you want to go there on the 22nd of March, they have a Pride in Nature LGBTQ plus tour, if you want to hear about LGBTQ plus communities within nature. So this made me think a lot more about all of the government waste that's going on in academic and settings and so on. And we have, for example, James Lindsay, who has been interviewed twice on UK Column. And he wrote this paper as part of what was called the Grievance Studies Affair with other previous former academics, I guess you could say, by writing fabricated papers that were still accepted and published in academic journals. And here's one example of one of their fake papers that he was a co-author on, called The Conceptual Penis as a Social Construct. This was, as we know, a fake paper, as were many others that he wrote at the time. But there are some other ones here that I want to cover that are actually real and tie in with this agenda that was covered, for example, at this Natural History Museum and many more. I found this one on a Substack post by Stephen Hayward. The post on Substack says that the Trump crusade to punish universities hasn't gone far enough. And that's because he found this paper. The title is probably the most woke paper I've ever heard of, which is saying something. The title is Queer Canine Becomings, Lesbian Feminist Cyborg Politics and Interspecies Intimacies in Ecologies of Love and Violence, written by Chloe Diamond Lenow. It is in the Journal of Lesbian Studies, and it was just published online on the 8th of March. I won't read you the entire abstract. You can go look it up if you want to, but it starts out by saying this article offers a queer lesbian feminist analysis attuned to lesbian, queer, trans, canine relationalities. Specifically, the article places queer and lesbian ecofeminism in conversation, et cetera, et cetera. I'll spare you the rest of it. So going into America, so that was also an American author, but one of the things that Musk and Trump has been doing, as you know, through the DOGE, government efficiency issues and so on, one of the things that they have done recently is limited the federal spending of government credit cards to a $1 credit limit for 30 days. So thank you to the viewer who sent this to us a few days ago. So I looked at a particular example. One of the things that's been circulating around social media is that one of these was a $600,000 grant, which was given to a university to study what they call studying menstruation issues, including in trans men. So I wanted to look at the original grant to see if that was really what they were doing. And it looks like what they're doing is actually looking at the products that are involved in feminine hygiene of things that women use during their periods. Yes, women and girls again. But it did say in the abstract for the grant, it is also important to recognize that transgender men and people with masculine gender identities, intersex and non-binary persons may also menstruate. So not only trans men, but anyone who menstruates. Back in the UK, this was reported last week by the Telegraph that Shakespeare's Birthplace is going to be decolonized. So we have to, I guess, destroy the history of one of the greatest authors that have ever existed in our country. So I traced this back to a 2022 academic blog post from the National Center for Academic and Cultural Exchange. There was a PhD project called Decolonising the Shakespeare Birthplace, Trust Collections as an Inside Outsider, a perspective on collaborative research, by someone called Helen Hopkins at Birmingham City University. This was funded by the UK government as part of a larger doctoral training program, which is meant to do three principal things to recognize the role Shakespeare has been forced to play in establishing and upholding imperialistic narratives of cultural supremacy, to purge the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust interpretative policies and brand narratives of Anglocentric and colonialist thought, and to institute new communicative strategies to address societal inequities that are embedded in imperialism and associated with Shakespeare's global cultural status. Another grant that I found that is funded by the UK government is also from Birmingham City University. There's an entire database you can search yourself. This one that I found is called The Europe That Gay Porn Built. This is 841,830 pounds running from November 2023 to October 2027. Asking the question, the very important question, how did the growing transnational circulation of gay male erotica and porn magazines in post-war Europe contribute to the development of a shared identity and a sense of belonging among European gay men? And one that's worth even more money is over £1 million, 1,254,813 pounds, running from September of 2024 to September to 2027. This one is called Inclusive History. According to a press release on the Royal Holloway University of London's website, this money will enable the university to embed 5 postdocs with its partners over 2 years to research case studies that center around the voice, agency, and contribution of traditionally marginalized groups to the struggle for rights and representation. So I have a quick video here from a lecturer at Royal Holloway talking about equality, diversity, and inclusivity. Let's see what she had to say.
Oh, my name is Dr. Shamima Akhtar and I'm a lecturer in the Department of History here at Royal Holloway. So in addition to teaching here at Royal Holloway, I'm also the EDI lead for the department, which stands for Equality, Diversity and Inclusivity. Now, why is EDI important? Why does it matter for history and for historians and you as students? Well, you may not know this, but the Royal Historical Society, they published a report in 2018 called the Race Report, and this was a survey of undergraduate history in the UK, and they found that 94% of all staff at university at teaching history were white, and of this 6%, only 0.5% were black. And when it came to students, again, they found that whilst a quarter of UK's population study at undergraduate level degrees across the UK, only a small proportion of them do history, and then an even smaller proportion of them are BME. So some of the questions that you kind of might find yourself asking when you come to do a course at Royal Holloway is, why is my campus so white? Why is my curriculum so white? And as the EDI lead for the department, these are some of the things that we can talk through. We have schemes such as a BME mentorship scheme. We have a seminar series that highlights kind of people of colour doing history. We have all sorts of initiatives for you to get involved with if you are interested at all in these kind of conversations about race, ethnicity and equalities.
So it would appear as though history needs to be more inclusive to include more people that are not largely representative of the majority of the population of the UK, which is where this university is located. And also, she was wrong. She said equality, but of course that should be equity, which we know at the UK column are two very different things. And inclusivity versus inclusion. So again, she can't even use the right terminology, and she didn't seem terribly sure about she was telling us anyway, even though she's apparently the lead for her area. Just as an and finally on the segment, I have one this is from Sweden from a couple of years ago, but I just thought this one was really interesting as well. The title is Who's Afraid of the Vulnerable Terrorist? Framing Violent Jihadists' Life and Intimate Relationships. This article looks at a sample of academic articles in the field of terrorism studies and international relations to explore the ways in which marriage, sexual activity, and close relationships in jihadist groups are framed, imagined, and investigated using the learnings of queer scholarship. So there's your into the segment. I just wanted to kind of start to show some of the ridiculous things that are being funded in our universities. And I think the British taxpayers need to know exactly where their money is going, Brian.
Diane, thank you very much for that segment. Immensely important, because this is the agenda that is going to finally destroy this country unless we stop it with spades at ground level. And a lot of people, I think, see it and just think it's silly nonsense, but this is the stuff that destroys minds, and particularly the minds of our children. Let's leave it there. I'm going to say, Diane, Jobst and Ben, thank you very much for joining me today. For people who are full-time supporters of UK Column, there will be UK Column Extra in a few moments, and we'll be discussing more in more detail the main points that we've covered in the news today. But thank you, wherever you are in the world, for joining us, and thank you so much to everybody who supports the UK Column. We will be back at the same time on Wednesday for UK Column News Extra few minutes. Bye-bye.